Welcome to segment number 2 of Delivery, our physical presence as we preach. And so here as we begin, we're going to think about our posture and how important posture is to preaching. Now, you can say for sure that that person, the sad man in Van Gogh's painting, is definitely conveying something to us by his posture, isn't he? We are always conveying to others by our posture, and we are conveying it, let me say, by the minute we leave the pew or the seat. And I had a student kind of slump her way up to the podium because she wasn't wanting to give her sermon, and she meant it sort of comically. But we pointed out, we're learning things about you and how you feel about this moment. We are taking cues from you from the beginning. So we are communicating to others by our posture, but there's actually a more sneaky reason that I want you to work on your posture, and which is that you're actually communicating to yourself as you hold yourself. And some of this can take effect even before you begin to preach. And so I'm guessing that some of you have watched already Amy Cuddy's TED Talk. It's one of the most popular TED Talks of all time, and I strongly encourage you to watch it. It's in the Moodle resource page, but she makes the point that our posture, that she had people actually do what she called the power pose, this or this stance, for 2 minutes, and she took a little saliva sample prior to that and after it, and then she and her team of researchers had people go into a mock interview, and she had another group do kind of a slouched over, curled in upon themselves posture, and not surprisingly, but rather strikingly, the results were dramatic. How much better people did in these interviews, depending on how they had primed themselves in their posture before the event. So it didn't even have to do with what they were communicating to the interviewers during the event. They just were more confident going in. So I actually, one of my practices as a preacher is that when I have a study, I've had a couple of, I do mostly guest preaching at the moment, but in my last pastorate, I had a study, and I would actually set a timer for 2 minutes because it's longer than you think. And as I'm standing here, I'm gonna hold this for 2 minutes while I talk to you for a moment. And I encourage you to do the same. Just stand up and put your arms up. And I would actually just walk around my pastor's study praying for my people for 2 minutes with my arms like this. And what's wonderful about it is what it's doing for your energy, for your confidence, and all of these intangibles that Amy Cuddy has studied through the saliva. She actually measures your hormones and sees that you actually have more testosterone, more confidence, less cortisol, the anxiety hormone. But it's also just opening up your lungs and your vocal cords, and opening your diaphragm up for good volume and pitch as well. So it has so many benefits. So I really encourage you to take at least 2 minutes in a power pose before you begin, and then to seek also to keep that open posture throughout your sermon. One of the things just in the little tips area about posture is your feet. And so when we think of posture, we think of not slouching with our shoulders. But the other thing that we do is that we have fidgety feet. And in football, they say good footwork will lead to good solid handwork, and it'll set you up for the whole of your body in whatever game you play. And it's true in the pulpit as well, that I'm all for walking, but when you are rooted, be rooted, and don't be fidgety with your feet, because that gives you a less firm, confident, solid stance in your whole body. So pay attention to your feet and your shoulders in your posture. and to having your head up and out. And so part of what that means is set up your podium such that you can be looking out and not down. For some of my online students, I know they actually, if you're preaching in a home, excuse me, I know you can't always set up a congregational setting for all three of your sermons. And so you're preaching at a kitchen table and you're way, way down too far, or some people actually just were holding their manuscripts in their first sermon. So I found myself halfway, third of the way through the quarter, sending out a word to please get a podium, even if it's just a music stand, so that you can be out, not down. So all of that is related to postures. Do what you need to do logistics-wise to be looking out and not down. So the next area is gestures that I want to talk about. And communication theorists break this down into three types of gestures. The first are illustrative gestures that actually emphasize and build upon and reiterate a point. So what I was going for there is not putting God in a box or something like that, with illustrative gestures, they actually deepen meaning, and they can actually help our visual learners in what is a very auditory process. And so it's worth finding a few places in your sermon. I don't encourage you to plan out your gestures. I think that can make them artificial. But generally when I'm practicing, I'll notice a few that just seem to come to mind about a ways that we shaping or forming or something that I just have done, and I say, oh, that's good. I tuck it away and say, let's plan on doing that. So I plan a few illustrative gestures. And then the second are affective gestures, where they convey the emotions. They invite people in when we're being big and expansive. They invite people. They are warm. And so just work on, my advice to you here in the area of gestures is this is not, for some of you, you're Italian or, you're just culturally or the way you're wired, you're always lots of gestures, but some of us may be very limited with this, and you need the reminder, be bigger than life here. This is not a chat with a friend across a table. This is a big moment. And so even, and here again for this, since it is an online class, I want to say, even if you're preaching in a living room to 5 friends, tell them, my professor wants me to be big. She wants me to be bigger than life here, so I'm going to make some big, bold gestures. Don't laugh. Okay? And then the third are compensatory gestures. These are the ones that we want to move from conscious incompetence and eventually move them on out. And these are the ones that are really the placeholders for our nervousness. And it's a way that our body localizes the stress that we're feeling. And so the challenge is just simply to become aware of them. I have, for my women, I tend to get more of the pulling their hair away from their face. And for my guy seminary students who are newly married and they've never worn a ring before, I tend to get this one. For many students who are just new to public speaking, they don't know what to do with the podium. Do I grab it, grip it? And so just simply rest your hands on it is just fine. And so some of this compensatory gestures can just be frenetic, excessive gesturing as well, can be another thing we do with our nervousness. So all of this is simply a call to watch yourself and see what you liked and see what you didn't like. I watched myself one time and thought, wow, my fingers are just kind of spidery. My gestures are kind of, my fingers are long and thin, and I thought, I think I just want to bring them together. It just is a more solid gesture. So it was a small thing, but it was something that I noticed by watching. And so this is where the recordings will really come in, as well as feedback from our peers. Facial expression, and here I have Francis Chan because he's a master, I think, of the facial expression as well as of gestures. And so I do hope that all of you, when you're watching, choosing a few videos to watch, well, if you haven't ever before, will at least watch a segment of Francis Chan, because he has such fluid, beautiful gestures and control of his gestures. He knows when to just put his hands behind his back and completely stop gesturing. But he also has just amazing eyes and expression to his face. So our facial expressions should support and reinforce our content. And this is where the trouble areas in this one can be where if we're nervous and we just are trying so hard to convey warmth that we're smiling even as we're talking about our mother-in-law dying, that's a problem. So be working on congruence in the area of facial expression. You want it to actually match and reinforce your content, and you want an adequate range so that you can express a lot. Movement. You're not chained to the pulpit, and in this class, I think some people coming out of more Pentecostal backgrounds who have never written a manuscript before think, oh, she wants me to be like a Presbyterian and just be behind the pulpit like Craig Barnes. And you'll see Craig Barnes is one of my favorite Presbyterian preachers, and he's pretty chained to his pulpit. But you're not. You really are welcome to move around. You don't even need to bring a manuscript into the pulpit if you don't want to. You just need to write it and upload it and know it. And most of us will find that the best way to do that is to bring it with us. But you don't need to, and you don't need to stay behind the pulpit the whole time. In fact, I strongly encourage you to move away from it at times. And if you've never seen the movie Luther, it's a little older movie now, but you can, I'll try to upload that. There's a wonderful segment of Luther on YouTube that where he's preaching, and he actually walks through the aisles and leans forward and looks right in the faces of some of his listeners as he preaches. So you can walk around, you can even walk the aisles if you'd like, but don't become a caged tiger. You know what I mean by that is the pastors who just go up and back and up and back, and be aware of your rocking. There are always a few in every class who are rocking front to back or side to side. Especially the new parents are doing this one, of course, because that's what they're doing to soothe their babies. So just be aware of your rocking tendencies and save it for the rocking chair. Eye contact. Goals for eye contact. I don't need to convince you of the value of eye contact. You've seen it with your fellow preachers, and you know how much it connects you with your listeners. And I would say it not only conveys warmth, but it really conveys that authority. It commands attention and it keeps attention. So I know as a listener, when someone is making contact with me, I make eye contact back. And so what I want to do here is make it possible for you. I don't need to convince you that it's valuable, but it's hard for some of us. And so the places where it's most difficult for us as preachers is our first lines and our last lines, because we have taken the time to craft them well, and we're nervous, and we tend to look down to get it right in those moments. And so I would just encourage you, let it go. It doesn't matter if you don't land that line perfectly and say every word that you wrote on your manuscript. It's so much more important in those moments that you are connecting with your listeners. And so you will know them well, but then don't worry about getting them exactly right. And then the third goal is to tell your stories with no notes. And here I encourage you to write your story out if you have a personal story that you'll be sharing, or a story of Mother Teresa or somebody else's life. Write it out, but then get to the point where in your manuscript I just exit out, or I just write across the top dog story or something, so that I know what's coming, but I don't I don't actually have it in my manuscript. So I can really and then I always walk away. These days I've made it a discipline to always walk away from the pulpit while I'm telling a story. The fourth place where I see eye contact go is in transitions, last lines of paragraphs to first lines of the next. because we're building and we've developed this point and this argument, and it's going to land with this great heart moment, and we're so excited about that, and we're in the segment, right? We're in that moment, and we've maybe even kind of memorized it, and we're comfortable doing it, and then this little nagging thought comes to mind that says, you don't know what's coming next. You don't know what the first line is of the next segment. That's very normal. It means you're really in the moment. And so what I would say to you is, that's fine. You don't need to know it. It's okay if your mind is drawing a complete blank about what comes next. Land this part. And we've just watched the Olympics, and all the gymnasts, we know how that they stuck the landing, they'll say, and just how important it is to stick that landing and land that moment and knock it out of the park, then look down. And that will give you a nice natural pause and let them absorb your point that you've just made. And it can be very natural. And so I want to just remove from your mind that worry. I don't know what's coming next, so I'm going to have to look down as I'm giving my wonderful segment, okay? So, let's hope I can get out of this loop. Actually, that's all I have for this segment. So, those are my main points for you about our physical presence, and we will move on now to our vocal presence.